Well, good morning and welcome everyone. Greetings from all of us at Sutton. And thank you for joining us today for this webinar titled Building Resilience for New Waves with our special guest speaker, Betty-Ann Heggie. And before we start, I just want to tell you that this, as I was sharing with Betty-Ann, this is an amazing group of people in attendance today, a powerhouse of 100 people across Canada. And I'm just thrilled that we're all here together for this important conversation. And if I had a magic wand, it wouldn't be minus 37 in Saskatchewan today, and we would all be together in a magnificent room together in person. But with this technology, it just gives us the opportunity to have this little timeout in our day wherever we are planted. So I know I'm guilty of this too, and it's not a secret that we don't build resilience by multitasking. So for the next hour, I'm going to encourage you to turn off the emails, shut everything else down, and just lean in and enjoy this conversation together. So before I formally introduce Betty-Ann, I just wanted to share a little bit of background, and she will, I'm sure, smile at this. But personally, I had admired Betty-Ann from a distance early in my career, and I didn't have the courage or the confidence back then to actually introduce myself to her. So when she founded the Betty-Ann Heggie Mentorship Program more than a decade ago, I think I was probably the first in line to apply as a protege. And my experience in that program had an incredible influence on my journey, both personally and professionally. And this woman that I had admired from a distance, I got to know better, and she's even better close up, I can tell you. So how this talk came to be is I had shared with Betty-Ann about some training we were doing for our clients on workplace mental health leadership. And this kind of led to a conversation about, a potential fourth wave of this pandemic being a mental health crisis, and the need for all of us to build our resilience, continue building it, and to help prepare for what's going to come next, because we don't know. And so Betty-Ann, as you'll see, is a gifted speaker and storyteller, and I knew this was an important conversation for us to have with our network. So that brings us to today. So just some quick notes. The chat box at the bottom, it is private, and Erin, our host at Sutton, she will be monitoring it. So if you're having difficulties, you can chat with Erin. And if you do have some questions you'd like to direct to Betty-Ann, you can put those in the chat feature as well. And if we have time at the end, we will address what we can. So my formal introduction of Betty-Ann. She is a thought leader in gender dynamics and has had articles featured in the Harvard Business Review, Inc. magazine, Apple News, and Huffington Post. She's the author of Gender Physics, Unlock the Energy You Knew You Had to Get the Results You Want. And she speaks regularly on how men and women can progress together in the modern workplace. She's a former senior vice president with Potash Corp, which is now Nutrien, the world's largest fertilizer company. And she's been named a distinguished speaker by the Canadian Mining Institute, given the Trailblazer Award from Women in Mining Canada, and named one of the 100 global inspirational women in mining. She was inducted into the Hall of Fame of Canada's top 100 most powerful women, the Saskatchewan Business Hall of Fame, given the Queen's Golden Jubilee Medal, the YWCA Lifetime Achievement Award, and the University of Saskatchewan Alumni Mentorship Award. Betty-Ann currently serves on the board of TIFF, the Toronto International Film Festival, where she initiated the Share Her Journey program to give more women's stories told by women. And she spearheaded the Mentorship program I mentioned earlier at the Edwards School of Business, a program that's designed to keep women in the workforce and get them to the decision-making table. Welcome, Betty-Ann, and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Andrea. It's really my pleasure to be here.
So happy to have you here, Betty-Ann. So let's dive right into this. I just kind of like to start with, more of a general conversation with you about this, shared COVID experience we're all having together. And I want to kind of focus more on the positive. So, what do you think, because of the length of time of this pandemic, what's changed for the better for all of us?
Well, I think that we've all had to go inward. We're all thinking about, instead of being so focused on the outside world and all the hurry, I used to always say I suffered from hurry sickness. And now I think it's really caused all of us to go inside. So it says the audio is bad for Betty-Ann is coming up. Are you hearing bad audio?
It fixed
Sorry about
itself
that. I
now,
wonder if I
Betty-Ann.
could turn this down a little bit, if that might help. I just want to acknowledge at this time that, when we went into the pandemic, we really thought it was a sprint. And now we're discovering it's a marathon. And unfortunately, we don't know whether we're really at mile 14 or mile 20. And so we don't know how much is left. And I just want to sort of acknowledge Andrea for recognizing that this is something we all need to be thinking about, is our own personal resilience, because I think the timing couldn't be better right now. It just sort of feels like a year ago, we thought the weddings that we'd planned, these special events, all the rituals, we thought we could postpone them all a year. And now we're looking ahead and saying, can we? Mm-hmm. So it's, I think for all of us, it can be very deflating. And I just think that it's caused all of us to take a pause from the world. And we're facing a disruptor. And we know that when things are disrupted, that we're going to come out the other side where things are going to be different. So we have to kind of look at this right now as a time when we're learning our skills as to what we need when we come out on the other side. And I do think that we were so wound up in the external world in what I would call a lot of pacifiers, and they've all been taken away from us. And so now here we are, we're at home, we're staying at home, we're not seeing people, we're not traveling, doing all the things that we used to do. And it's causing us to reflect and contemplate. And I think that it's causing us to realize that we can do a lot more than we thought we could do, that we can handle a lot more than we thought we could handle, and that resilience is going to serve us well in the future.
Yeah, great comments, Betty-Ann. I'm sure many are just nodding their heads, because for sure at the beginning, I think there was almost this adrenaline high, as we're adapting and making changes. And then as we sort of settle into it, then, it's given us time to, take a different look at the way we were living and the things that we were doing. And I know for myself, I've spent a lot more time outside and in nature. And I read somewhere about, just being outside gives you a feeling of abundance, and inside gives you a feeling of scarcity. And we're having this time to be in nature and have those good feelings. So
I'm going to just add to that, Andrea, because what I've really noticed is that for self-care, we all know that we need to do, eat properly, exercise, get enough rest, spend time on some kind of spiritual practice. And yet it's really hard to do all those things. But what I've really noticed is that we all approach them differently. And the pandemic has given us a chance to get to know ourselves better. Mm-hmm. So for me, for example, where somebody else might do exercise where they compete with somebody, or they do it online with a program where they get the energy from seeing the person doing the dancing. For me, it's important to walk in nature. So your comment about being outside, I have really feel like I have gotten in touch with nature a lot more since the pandemic. I notice the sunrises, the sunsets, the birds, which I never paid attention to before at all. And so I do think that for each of us, how we administer and practice self-care is very individual. And it's important for us to learn what's right for us. And as opposed to everything that the outside world is telling us we need to do. And so we need to find what gives us relief personally. And that's just such an important part of it, and an important lesson that I think we're learning during the pandemic.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, because yeah, what works for me is not necessarily going to work for someone else. And I think I've been experimenting with things. I had shared with you, I started meditating this year as a part of my sort of morning routine. And we did get a bird feeder, which we're enjoying very much in our backyard. But yeah, it feels like this experimenting to see what, fills you up and gives you the energy you need to stay positive and have hope and keep going. So,
well, if you think about it, we have been in a fight or flight for the last year, and that builds up cortisol in our system. And so we do need to find ways to reduce that cortisol. And one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot is that laughter reduces it. And so I have actually spent a lot of time thinking about humor and what kinds of stories are funny and what kinds of things bring me joy, because that's it, to a certain extent, I think that the pandemic has taught me to enjoy things more, because I look for joy now that I didn't, and I find that I'm just a lot more grateful than I used to be for things in my life, because maybe I was too busy to even appreciate them before.
mhm, mhm, mhm. Well, for those on the call that know my husband Tim, I'm very fortunate because he is funny and has a great sense of humor. So it serves me well. But I wanted to just, you made a comment before about the things, like, we know the things we should be doing, and maybe there's this sort of pressure to be doing that, and I just maybe want you to comment on, does it have to be big, or like how do we balance that should do and what is we're able to do?
Well, I do think, back to my comment, that we have to find what's right for us as individuals is really important, because what somebody else says may not be right for you, and we shouldn't put any of these shoulds on ourselves. And we especially shouldn't put shoulds on ourselves during a pandemic. I just think we need to be a lot gentler with ourselves, and that we should be thinking about what makes me feel good, what brings me relief. Yeah, I want to do some exercise, but maybe it's as simple as I'm going to walk. All I'm going to do is walk to the end of the laneway and back every day. Or, yeah, I know I should be eating more healthy, but all I'm going to do is I'm going to increase the amount of fresh food I eat every day. I'm going to just make it a point of having something fresh every time I eat. And I'm not going to worry about the cookies. I just think that we really need to relax a little bit and be gentle with ourselves right now, because we are under very extenuating circumstances and we're learning a whole bunch of new things. And if we're not doing everything as well as we think we should be doing them, we should just give ourselves a break and be gentle with ourselves.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. It's that balance, because yeah, I've had a lot more time to bake as well at home. So I like to enjoy that too. So so can you give me some other examples? You gave some good ones already, but just little baby steps that we can do to incorporate in our day.
Well, you know what's really interesting, because baby steps are, it's such a, we shouldn't be demanding big changes in ourselves. We really, if we can just do small things, that's how we're going to actually make progress, because these small things build on each other and they become big successes. And I remember reading once about a woman who went to the doctor and her blood pressure was high, and the doctor was saying, well, you need to, cut out sugars, and you need to be exercising an hour every day. And this woman, you could just tell by the look on her face that there was no way she was going to be able to do all that. She was already thinking, I've got an aging mother to take care of, I've got little kids to take care of. And the doctor was smart enough to change routes and say to the woman, well, you probably enjoy, relaxing a little bit at night watching TV. And she said, oh yeah. And he said, Well, could you see yourself standing up and marching in place every time a commercial comes up? And she said, yeah, I think I could do that. And so he said, okay, well, why don't you do that for a month and come back and see me? And when she came back a month later, she said, well, I'm not only marching in place to the commercials now, I'm actually going to march. I march in place on the main, I stand up and march in place while I'm watching the show. So you see, because he didn't give her that great big thing to do that meant she probably was doomed for failure, because she would say, oh, I just can't possibly do all that. Instead of that, she did the little things that ultimately gave her the confidence and encouraged her to do more.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really think that what we should be doing right now during a pandemic is being kind to ourselves, not shaming ourselves, not putting a lot of shoulds on ourselves, but instead just making small changes in our lives that eventually are going to add up to bigger things.
Such good advice. I do want to touch on, like we talked about, the spirituality and fitness and just we could talk about just that lack of feeling connected. Like, I know as an extrovert, I am energized when I'm around people, and especially when I was working at home, and even now, I feel that loss of energy because I'm missing that human connection with friends and family and people I love. So, yeah, do you have any thoughts on how, first energy wise, and then how to stay connected with people?
Well, it's tough for extroverts. There's no doubt about it. I have a good friend that's an introvert, and I called her one day and I said, I bet your world has hardly changed. And she said, no, it hasn't at all. She said, I was just saying that. I was always quite comfortable to be by myself in my house, and I still am. So I do think that it is tougher for extroverts, but I think it is a good thing for us to learn to go inside. But we still need that connection. And I will tell you that a lot of the things that I identified with for the way that I lived in the world have all been taken from me. Like, I always prided myself in finding the unique restaurant and inviting people all to a special evening. And of course, those things are all off limits now. And so it makes it, I kind of am not able to sort of express myself how I'm used to expressing myself. But this is a time that we do start to look at things differently. Just as a matter of interest, Isaac Newton developed gravity during a pandemic, during the bubonic plague. He went out to the countryside and saw an apple drop from a tree, and it made him realize that there is something that pulls towards the earth, which he would never have thought about in his regular life. So we are being forced to think about things differently. And I think one of the things that it's done is that we're able to eliminate people from our lives that maybe didn't give us energy. Like, we starting to learn what gives us energy and what takes it away, and what people nourish us and which ones don't. And maybe this is a good chance to kind of ease away from some of those people that don't nourish you. And for those that do, obviously you can do technology, connecting with friends and family like this. People are doing socially distanced walks. It's, it's sending things to people, trying to connect. You mentioned baking. I read about a guy that decided to learn to bake during the pandemic, and now he drops off baking to everybody in his cul-de-sac every day. And so it's a way of him feeling like he's being of service, but he's also connecting with people in a way that he's feeling like he's still living out his special gifts of being able to share with others. So, it's a funny thing, but we will find ways to connect. And it can be as simple as sharing an article with someone and then having an exchange on it. We want to feel like we still connect with people, and we have to find ways to do that. And sometimes it's things as simple as I read about two women who they knew that they wanted some change in their lives. It's an interesting thing. We all want change, and we're finding that it's almost like Groundhog Day. Every day we get up and we have the same things that we're doing.
Totally.
And we also need routine. So we need that balance between change and routine. And I read about these two women that put a dozen things in individual envelopes that were just something different that you could do, such as bake a cake or light a candle or take a bath or with aromatherapy or whatever, and put them all in envelopes and sent them to each other. And every day they had to open up their envelope, and whatever it was that they got, they had to take it out and do that thing, and then they reported back to each other. So we can find ways to connect. Unfortunately, what happens is that we start feeling so apathetic about, everything's the same and it's Groundhog Day. And so we even get out of our routines where, some of us, and including me, sometimes aren't getting dressed. And so it's kind of like, here I am. I used to feel like I really expressed myself through fashion and always thought fashion was fun. And now I'm wearing my robe all day. So we do need those routines. And, I think a small step might be something as simple as, all right, I'm going to leave my robe on until noon, and then I'm going to exercise, and then I'm going to shower, and then I'm going to get dressed. That's my small step. I will allow myself the comfort of my robe until noon, but then I'm going to do some exercise, and I'm going to feel better by showering and getting dressed.
Oh, that made me smile. I mean, it reminded me. I have a group of girlfriends that, we've been friends for forever. And it was such a small thing. It was last week, and I bought a new shirt, and then I got my husband to take a picture, and I, did a fancy pose. And I said, I think this is my new signature look. And then I just sent it off. And then every one of them took a picture of them as they were, working. And it just totally filled my day, right? Because it was like I missed seeing them, and just seeing them as they were in that moment. This little, picture of them was great, and it didn't take any time at all. So
yeah, you just made a connection, and that's what we want. We're human beings. The connection's important to us.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a perfect segue into, we have a couple of polls that we want to hear from all of you as well. So Iron's going to pull up this poll. We just kind of want to hear what's been the biggest lifesaver for you during the pandemic, whether it's been connecting with friends and family through technology, establishing daily routines and rituals. Is exercise been key, reflection, or just positive thinking? So if you want to tune in and share, and then we can have a quick chat about the results. So number one I see is connecting with friends and family through technology, followed by the establishing daily routines and rituals. Yeah, we've been having the Zoom happy hours with our parents, which has been great. And I can say for myself, my morning routine was a lifesaver. That's probably my number one, because that was in place before, and I felt complete control over that. So everything I did in the morning was the same, and that ritual, that routine, just really helped me face whatever was going to be that day. What about you, Betty-Ann? Any comments on those poll results?
I'm not surprised that connecting with friends and family through technology is first. I think it's been really important to us. And I do think it is going to change the way we interact in the future. And I think, for example, I would always be getting on a plane to fly to a board meeting somewhere. And now we've gotten used to having Zoom board meetings. And I can see us now probably only having in person when the world goes back to whatever the new normal is. I can see us maybe having an in-person board meeting maybe once every 3 times. We'll have a Zoom meeting, and then maybe we'll have an in-person one. Mm-hmm. So I could see that, and that's probably better for the world. I mean, fewer emissions, probably easier for us. We're not going to have the same wear and tear on our bodies, getting on and off airplanes and flying around. So I can see that that's changing the way we're going to interact in the future. But I do think that, what I'm hearing from people that are getting vaccinations is that they're enjoying the fact that they now can actually hug somebody. Some of these senior citizens who are saying, it's been a year since I've been hugged, and now I feel like I can actually hug somebody again. So I think we're all missing that. What I would say is, as long as we're doing one of these, it's going to lead to doing some of the others. And it is really helps us, because it gives us some energy that we feel like we want to carry on, and then we feel like we have the energy to do other things. And so, maybe you're a person who's drawn to exercise more than you are through anything else. But if you get that exercise, you then feel like you've got the energy to do something else. And it probably puts you in a more positive frame of mind, and it's easier to do positive thinking. Or if you're a person that tends to be more cerebral, you might start with positive thinking, but it might lead to exercise. And maybe you're an introvert, but it gives you then the energy that you feel like you need to connect through technology with friends and family. So I think that what we are all searching for is balance between, having friends that we connect with, moving our bodies, having a good frame of mind, feeling like we have a spiritual connection. And I saw a note come up here that somebody mentioned how important service was for them. And I think I couldn't agree more. I just think that if we start with one of these, whatever is important to us personally, it leads to the others, and it helps us live a more balanced life.
Completely agree. I feel like we need to really figure out what that lead domino is for us, because then the rest will follow. So I want to shift gears a little bit, Betty-Ann, and just see, I'd love your perspective on what you're seeing in leadership. So business, politics, we won't get too political today, but just in general, are you noticed anything about our leaders?
Well, I think the pandemic has caused us to look at leadership differently. First of all, a lot of the countries in the world that handled the pandemic successfully up front were countries that were led by women, or maybe men that had a lot of the attributes of the feminine, which meant that they were willing to listen to experts. And the countries that did the worst, many of them had authoritarian leaders that, the United States, Brazil, Russia, Iran, Britain, the authoritarian leaders who were like, I'm the leader and I'm the boss and I knew better than the experts. And of course, they got themselves in trouble. Interestingly, the countries that are doing the best with the vaccine seem to be the ones that have the more masculine attributes of, I'm going to get this done, as opposed to, I want to make sure that it's very equal for everybody.
Yeah.
So, I think the biggest things I've noticed around leadership are that it used to be, if a man cried or teared up, that it was the kiss of death. And now what we're seeing is, when the pandemic first started and all these world leaders were having so many people that were dying on their watch, they were going on television and they were choking up. And we actually related well to those people. We thought they cared. We were all in pain, and we appreciated that they were in pain and they shared it with us. So I do think that maybe it's changing our views of leadership. I think also those who were more communicative, who showed their vulnerability, who shared that they were in pain as well. It made people feel more comfortable with them because they felt like they shared something. So I do think that we are looking differently at leaders now. I also think that it's causing us, in all of our connections, to go to a little bit deeper level with people. Well, a lot of our relationships before may have been more on the surface, but what we're finding is that people are sharing their concerns, their mental health. And I've just noticed on Facebook even, a lawyer who wrote something saying, when I first started practicing law, I was feeling a lot of pressure and I felt like I needed some help. And I got some help through the counselors available through the Law Society. And the tools that I learned then have really helped me now. And I don't know if that lawyer would have shared that before. He would have thought maybe it was a weakness. And all these other people were commenting and saying, thank you for sharing that. And, I really feel like we have connected on something that I wouldn't have thought about you before, and it's really helped me. Thank you. And I think people are sort of reaching out to other people and saying, how are you doing, with real sincerity. I have a friend that's a senior executive. She was a senior executive. She now serves on a number of boards. She's a strong, competent woman. And she and I have taken our relationship to a place just over the telephone where we wouldn't have gone before, where she actually has shared to me how she's having trouble sleeping. And that she feels that it's, a lot of the cortisol in her system. She feels a lot of fear. And, I remember early on in the pandemic, I'm getting more used to it now, but when I first started, I would kind of lay in bed and think to myself, am I having trouble breathing? Did I not wash those groceries well enough? Maybe I got it in my system. And, I shared with her that years ago, I took a class on the inner child in each of us. And I said, when I wake up at night, I imagine that inner child and I go in and hug it. And I always get back to sleep because it comforts me. Now, she and I would never have had a conversation like that before. So I think that that's one of the gifts of the pandemic, is that we are going to a deeper level with people and we are sharing our vulnerabilities, and it's making us closer and it's making us understand humanity better.
Mm-hmm. No, I couldn't agree more. And well, how this all started, right, with that training that we've been offering and on mental health in the workplace and for our leaders. And we're doing another course in March because they keep filling up, because people are looking for resources now for themselves as leaders and for their teams. And I think, I completely agree. There's just a better awareness and understanding that we're all on a spectrum of mental health, and it's varying along that spectrum. It's not someone else, like it's all of us. And so just like anything, we want to get better at it, so we want to learn and we want to be open about it. So and then when you're talking about male leaders, I'm going to embarrass my husband now. You're talking about showing emotion, and my team at Sutton, and they will attest to this. So, we've seen more emotion from Tim, in the last 11 months than the last 20 years. And his joke is that I now leave a multivitamin out for him in the morning, and he thinks that I put estrogen or something in his multivitamin, and that's what's making him emotional. But I do think it's making him a better leader in our team, and clients have seeing him in a different light. And I agree with you. It's needed, and I like this shift. And I remember,
we used to always think about resilience. In fact, this is probably one of my failings as a mother. I knew that I felt like I was resilient because if things didn't work out for me at the office, I could put things behind me and I could just sort of say, okay, it's done, and I could move forward. Mm-hmm. And I remember my youngest daughter saying, I had to go to therapy so I could learn to feel my feelings, because you had always taught me just to keep putting my feelings behind me. Mm-hmm. And so, I think if I could say one thing to this group, I would say it's, this pandemic is forcing us to acknowledge our feelings and to feel them. And I think it's important, and I think that we need to feel them, and we need to acknowledge that we do feel fear, and that we've spent so much time trying to control our worlds. And what we've really realized is that how uncertain our worlds are. Like, we can't make any plans, because every time we think we're going to do something, we get our hopes up and they're dashed. And acknowledge that we can't control our worlds, and we do feel uncertainty.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, you just reminded me of actually a session at Mentorship that was quite a few years ago, and you had brought in a panel of male leaders, executives, and that was I think one of the main topics, because young women in their careers were talking about that fear of showing emotion, and then asking, how it was perceived, and trying to be able to, like you said, leave it behind you and deal with it. And yeah, it was an amazing conversation that day. I remember it very well. And yeah, it'd be interesting to have that same one today. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we'd find some different results,
I think
probably.
so.
Yeah.
Yeah. This, I saw lots of this on, Facebook early on, and we've even had conversations in our team, amongst our team, about, there seemed to be almost now with this, sort of pause, and we're all reflecting, there almost seemed to be this like pressure about us all finding a deeper purpose or a deeper meaning in what we were doing, and that if we weren't doing that, like something, again, these putting shoulds on ourselves. So yeah, if you can just comment on that. Like, you've given us lots of ideas of just being and doing small baby steps, but how do we balance that feeling of what am I missing, or how do I fulfill my purpose in life?
Well, I do think that we maybe put too much pressure on ourselves, that we have to find our own purpose. And I think that it's important that to me, finding our purpose is, we're kind of finding it right now when we're going inside, because, when we're spending more time with ourselves inside and less time sort of distracting ourselves with everything in the external world, we're actually finding a little bit more like, what really does please me? What really does give me energy? What are my real gifts and talents? Because each of us have something special about us that we were born to do. And I don't necessarily think it has to be like I was born to be a university professor, or I was born to be an athlete, a professional athlete. I think it is more, we can express our purpose on a very minuscule level. It's expressing that, they say that the world, each of us can change the world one small act of kindness at a time. And so I think if we can figure out what it is, who we are and what our special gifts are, that tells us how we can find our purpose, because that shows us how we can help others. Because it's really about believing that there's something greater that we're connected into, and that it's not really just about us. And I'm just sort of musing as I'm going along here that maybe that's another thing the pandemic has taught us, is that it's not just about us as individuals. It's about how we connect with other people, and the difference the things that we do make to the whole.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that our greater purpose can be not necessarily expressing it in a way that says, we have this big role to connect, but just more that we're connecting with something that's larger than ourselves. And that could be in a religious sense, or if it was in nature, but it's in a way of saying, I am one small part of something that's much larger, and I have to bring my gifts forward. And so often I find that really is connected to service, and it does go back to, it can be something very small, such as going on a community website and finding where there's a need. And, one of the things that I noticed, you could do is help people that are incarcerated, for example, who are getting out of prison, write resumes. And that's something that can be done long distance. And if you have you have an ability to write, you had an ability to work, you can do those kinds you've worked, you know what employers are looking for, you can help someone do that. So I think there's things that we can do that really are us expressing our purpose without us really thinking about it in this big form of it has to be something. We can express it so many different ways at different stages in our lives.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I love that. Yeah, it's like,
I'm just noticing Monica Kruger put up here, it's all about being able to share our gifts with everyone at every stage in our lives. And I couldn't agree more. I just think it's really making that connection. That's our purpose.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. yeah, and it's you're making me think, because it's like you made me think of it in this big way, but I find that the pandemic, this time is like just narrowed the focus
Yeah.
in a lot of ways, right? Into what's meaningful and important, and the people around you, and the depth of the relationships with, the people that are closest to you. And then, yeah, I've been thinking about, what I pour into them, what difference will that make in what they can do in the world. So, maybe it's just right close and personal to me is where I make my biggest difference. So
Yeah.
yeah, wonderful. Well, let's do another poll, Erin. On this note, just want to just a general sense of how everyone is doing. Like, we want to, yeah, I just want to get a sense of, are we happy? Are we okay? Or are we, not not loving life right now? There we go. Okay, yeah, like that's real, right? Thank you
I
for
was just saying to Andrea before the session started that I think people in Saskatchewan, and the bulk of the people on this call are from Saskatchewan, or many of them are very resilient. Maybe I could say all Canadians are resilient, because we do live in the north, and we do sort of face this cold weather that we know we can't survive on our own. We have to depend on other things. We know that nature's larger than we are, and that we can't control it, and that we've learned resilience. There's so many interesting sort of sayings about resilience, that a bone that is broken is, once it heals, is stronger than the bone was before, and that a diamond is really a rock that's been put under pressure. And I think, Andrea, you had one about sailors who learn the skills of a bad storm, end up being better sailors. And so it's interesting. I was reading an article last night about some of the countries in the world that have done well during the pandemic that it wasn't expected, such as Rwanda and Bhutan, because they didn't have the number of doctors they should have had according to the World Health Organization, for the number of people in the country. And yet, the underlying theme of the article was that these people in these countries have been through so many hardships already, that they have a real natural resilience, and they believe that they have to band together to have success. So they immediately, the minute they had their first case in Bhutan, they shut everything down and immediately did a lot of contact tracing, and discovered and put all those people into isolation, and they all went willingly. So it's really interesting how these things that we think are the toughest things in our lives end up making us more resilient, because afterwards we know that we can handle them.
Mm-hmm.
My mother always had a lot of sayings, and one of the things she used to say is, every time something happened to us that we thought was terrible, she'd always say, well, if it doesn't kill you, it'll make you stronger. A little small town wisdom there.
That's right. Well, and yeah, for our youth, our children, this is the hardest thing that they've experienced in their lives. So yeah, it is.
I should answer one more thing I maybe would say about that last question, is that we tend to get used to circumstances. Human beings really can adapt, and I think we're already adapting. But what's interesting is that the studies on happiness show that when people, that's why they always say money doesn't give you happiness, because whatever it is that you have, you tend to get used to it. So at first the money makes you happy, but eventually after a short time, you're kind of like, well, okay, I'm used to this now, and so I'm not happy anymore. And it's the same, I know, because having had a weight issue my whole life, I'm always studying food and why do I eat? And what I've read about it is on the same sort of happiness scale, is that you think you're going to eat something like sugar because it's going to make you happier. But after a short period of time, it doesn't. And then you think you need more of that substance to make you even bring you back to that same level of happiness. And eventually it doesn't bring you any happiness at all. So I think what we all have to do is we all have to think about, what is it that I can do for myself that makes me happy? And that goes back to where we kind of started, Andrea, which is find what's right for you, find what you can do. And I do find that when I have any of these negative thoughts, that positive thinking for me makes a huge difference. And that means practicing gratefulness and also practicing forgiveness. I find that if I can forgive people in my life that I think have harmed me, I then feel much happier. So if I can replace any of those feelings of fear and reframe everything around, I have this to be grateful for, and I'm forgiving these things, I find that I can really change. And those things in the external world that I thought I needed to make me happy are not as important to me.
Oh, that was really good. I just, when you're talking about, which we know money doesn't buy us happiness, and there's no magic bullet to building wealth either, just like there's no magic bullet to fix your happiness, right? It's like daily good decisions. And I remember that feeling at the beginning of the pandemic. Like I was looking for something, like a fix to make it better. Like I was searching for different things, and then like cookies or whatever. And then it was like, okay, that's not gonna fix it. This is a process. Yeah.
Well, I also think it's important to recognize that our brains, or actually our mind is different than our brain, but our brains are plastic, and we can learn resilience. We can learn resilience. They have studies that show that some small children are more resilient to other small children, but they follow those children through their lifespan. And the small children that weren't resilient, some of them learn it. They learn it by the way that they think about it. And so it goes back to some things that are, maybe ordinary kinds of wisdom, but they still hold true, which is it's not what happened to us, it's what we think about what happened to us.
Right.
And so we have a mind that is trying to help us by controlling us and telling us to be careful about this and be careful about that. And because it's trying to prevent us from having any harm. And yet sometimes that can put us into a constant state of fear, and that raises our cortisol levels. And so we have to, Arianna Huffington calls that the obnoxious roommate in our head. It's always very critical of everything that we're doing. And I think that, the pandemic allows you to feed into that a little bit, because you start getting afraid that, I didn't put my mask on, I forgot. And have I done something that's put myself at risk? And, you start thinking, it becomes awfulizing.
Awfulizing.
And, I think we recognize that we have to, one of the things that spiritual leaders recommend is always trying to look at your life from a distance. And if you can sort of step back from it and say, what's the likelihood that this is going to happen? And it's very unlikely. And you can sort of see your life like it's on a movie screen. It gives you that separation, that sense of detachment, and it allows you to move through life a lot more peacefully. One time I went to a therapist and I said to her, I have to keep reminding myself that where I am is where I am meant to be. And I went back to that same therapist about a year later. And she said, that one line that you used on me, I have told it to my clients for the last year and everybody's loved it. That we are really where we are meant to be. And we need to take some comfort in that and some solace that what's happening to us right now is where we are meant to be and what we need to be doing, and give ourselves some freedom and some peace around just kind of doing that on a daily basis.
That is awesome. And we're all meant to be here with you right now. Everyone that's on this call, you're all here for a reason. And just looking at some of the comments, and everyone's giving like great advice and tips and everything, which is just wonderful because we're all here teaching. Like you said, we're learning resilience together. I know I was impacted by a speaker I heard last year who had a very difficult incident as a child, and her kind of motto was about, she could do hard things. And I adopted that as a theme for myself this year in the third person. So it's funny when you said about looking, maybe at a distance. And so my theme this year is Andrea can do hard things.
Yeah.
And it's just, it gives me a little boost of confidence that, like, look what is behind you, and you've got this, whatever's coming your way. And resilience, like you said, is we can build it like a muscle and keep strengthening it and getting better. So Betty-Ann, as we're kind of nearing the end of our time together, you've shared so much with us, but just, do you have any, sort of your best tips on managing this, or closing comments that you wanted to share with us?
Well, I'm just noticing a comment coming up that working from home, many of us have found that work has taken over a greater percentage of our lives. And I do think that that is really true. And I just want to say that I know so many people that have had tough circumstances feeling the pressure of trying to educate their kids while they're still trying to save their businesses. And it's in some ways very heartbreaking. I read an article about a woman who was closing her restaurant just for a while, and she just said, in the last year I have pivoted so much. I have gone from being indoors to building outdoor patio, to trying to source heaters and mason jars, to closing my restaurant, being closed down again, and now I'm putting together gift baskets. And in the midst of all of this, I lost my sister in a tragic car accident. And she said, I just can't pivot anymore. So I know it's been really hard. I only can say that we are collectively making progress, and we just have to find a place that we can do something for ourselves, and that we really shouldn't be too hard on ourselves, and that we should really not be afraid to reach out, because everyone right now is going through it. Doesn't matter who you are, we're all feeling it. And it's part of it is controlling our thoughts, and part of it is trying to find some positive place to channel our feelings. And I do encourage people, even if it's just standing up and marching in place to the commercials, that it does make you feel better. And I just, say that it is a marathon. And, when that people are running that marathon and they know that half of it is left and they hit the wall, all they can do is just keep putting one foot in front of the other. And when they do, when it's all over, they kind of look back and say, I did it, and I can probably do more. And I think that's what we're all going to find, is that we did it and we probably can do more. And, we are all going to be a lot stronger for this. It's just that it's always hard to see when you're right in the midst of it.
Oh, the marathon analogy is perfect. So I think we've hit the wall a couple times, but we keep going, and we get our second wind, and having real conversations like this is, I think part of that. And like you said, checking in with each other and connecting is important, because sometimes we might give off that perception that we're fine, everything is great, and we're not okay. So well, there's been such wonderful comments, and just for the group, I want to share, we do plan to put together I'm going to write an article on the insights from today, and we will send out an email tomorrow with a link for like a survey for you to share your tips and best advice as well, because I'd like this to be a collective sharing what we learned from Betty-Ann and then from all of you here today. So just watch for that email from me tomorrow. And then just before you go, I have a couple quick things to just share with you that are great compliments to what we talked about today. So Erin's is going to bring up a poll. The first one is that mental health training. We're going to offer it one more time. I keep saying this because we keep filling them up, but we're doing a fourth session in March. It's 2 half days. And so if you'd like an invite for that, please just click yes, and then we'll see that in the notes. You don't need to share the poll, but just to share yes or no. And then again, mentioned today, we were talking about finances and money not buying happiness. And my partner Stuart, he's doing a webinar coming up soon on March 2nd on biggest retirement fears, and about what you're talking about, like that fear holding us back maybe in making good decisions about our future. So if you want to join us for that, just click yes, and we'll send you an invite. And it can be for someone, not maybe yourself, but someone in your life nearing retirement or just recently retired. And then my third piece of advice I wanted to share, if you don't have a copy of Betty-Ann's book, Gender Physics, you want to put that on your bookshelf and on your night table to read, because I was reflecting a lot of what we were talking about in managing energy and getting better results and knowing how to use our masculine and feminine energy appropriate to whatever situation that we are dealing with as leaders. And you can go online and buy Betty-Ann's book from her website, and I just encourage you all to do that. So if for those of you still with us, one more ask is just this time, instead of the chat, if you go to the Q&A button, if you could just share with us, if you can capture it in a couple of words, just what was the best thing about this conversation today, so we can share this with Betty-Ann and what you're leaving with us today, because our hope was to inspire you and encourage you to act on some small things to help continue to build your resilience. So, and as those come up, Betty-Ann, is there any other closing comments before we end?
I think, Andrea, I want to thank you for inviting me. I really felt like it's been a fun project for me to spend some time reading about resilience and thinking about it, and that's filled up my heart. So thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. I think we all teach what we most need to know. So I'm learning as we go on this too. And I just really appreciate everyone being with us, because it's that collective energy, I think, that we feel like we're part of a group and we're all sharing it. And I think it all leaves us feeling a little bit more fulfilled. So thank you.
Thank you, Betty-Ann. Hugs, high fives. You're just you're a treasure. And I don't know about everyone else, but my tank is full. So thank you. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.